Dear Prime Minister Gillard, thank you for making the weather nicer by forcing us to pay more for everything. Who knew that fixing the global climate was so simple? Still, one or two questions remain about your new plan and a few related matters.
Happy to be here, Tim, to answer your questions.
By how much will your carbon dioxide tax reduce Australia's temperature?
It won't, Tim. I need the cash to plug the deficit caused by my Labour government.
If after 5 years there has been no recorded decline in temperature, will the tax be abandoned?
Oh, don't be silly, Tim. We'll be addicted to the income by then.
Multiple choice. How much money has already been wasted by federal Australian governments on pointless climate change initiatives that have done nothing? A $2 billion, B $3.5 billion, or C $5.5 billion?
I'm a big picture person, Tim. I don't worry about minor details like that.
If taxing Australians at a certain level will make us more competitive with the rest of the world, as you claim, then surely taxing us at even higher levels will make us more competitive still. Universal taxation at, say, 80% should make us a global powerhouse. Why are you holding Australia back?
Don't be silly, Tim. Now you're just playing semantics.
You claim that Australians want this new tax. How about testing your theory at an election?
That's not an option, Tim. Given the recent news poll, we'd clearly get our asses kicked.
If I announced on television that I was going to kidnap the federal cabinet and put them through a series of deadly saw-style torture tests, do you think I could avoid charges by asking the police to stop going on about semantics and word games?
Oh, Tim. Please. But I could probably arrange it if you could exorcise my Bob Brown demon.
Do you have any experience in herding cats? This might be important during your coming 16 months of negotiations with the Greens, who you seem to have forgotten are completely insane.
I was very successful in herding out Kevin Rudd and Lindsay Tanner from our kitchen cabinet. Given I have 16 months, boning the Greens shouldn't be a problem.
Considering Labour couldn't run a simple grocery pricing website and Labour's attempts to insulate houses ended up setting them on fire and killing people, what are the odds Labour can successfully run the country's largest and most complicated tax regime?
Given our track record, Tim, success is highly unlikely. However, Bruce Hawker and his focus groups suggest we're on a winner with this new tax.
Labour promised to reduce the number of boat people arrivals. As with everything else, Labour's policies resulted in exactly the opposite outcome. Now you're trying to change the weather. Where should people hide?
I suggest concerned citizens buy the return ticket on an asylum seeker boat. We have boats leaving daily from Christmas Island. There are plenty of seats for the return journey.
Carbon dioxide contains 2 oxygen atoms for every 1 carbon atom. Shouldn't we call it an oxygen tax?
Yes, Tim. You are very astute. We thought we'd just start with a carbon tax. We'll roll out the oxygen tax with no public consultation after the next election.
If the aim of the carbon tax is to change behavior, why are you planning to compensate so many households? They'll just keep killing the planet and get no penalties at all.
The real aim is to redistribute wealth. Tim, the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary.
At what point does carbon dioxide's necessary presence in the atmosphere become pollution?
Until the budget deficit is paid off, and then we'll invent a new hobgoblin to tax.
If the carbon tax is definitely going to be introduced on July 1, 2012, how come Tim Flannery is going to be paid $720,000 over the next 4 whole years while he roams the country, explaining it?
Because Al Gore wanted $25 million to do the same job.
Isn't explaining new taxes your job? Or, more specifically, Wayne Swan's?
Under Labour's command economy, It's our policy to explain the very minimum to the Australian people. Otherwise they'll work out that we're full of bullshit and kick us out of office.
For that matter, where was Wayne the other day when you announced this massive new tax? You were there, and so was Bob Brown and Christine Milne and Greg Combet and Tony Windsor and the Hairy Princess. But no Wayne?
Wayne Swan is no longer part of my kitchen cabinet. I replaced all my kitchen appliances with green ones. Bob Brown is the key policymaker. I just rubber stamp what he wants because I like living in the lodge with my man bag Tim.
The next time you see Wayne, could you ask him why he said this last August? What we rejected is this hysterical allegation that somehow we are moving towards a carbon tax. This question should really be asked by journalists, I guess, but they were too busy making excuses for your hilarious lies.
As I already mentioned, Tim, Wayne isn't part of my new green kitchen cabinet. Now you should be aware, the Canberra Press Gallery, like the ABC, is the media arm of the Labour Party. Their role is not to question Labour policy detail. Their primary function is to spin our spin. I do miss the Ranga, Carrie O'Brien, however.
What is the point of building a $27 billion national broadband network to deliver computer connectivity across the nation when Greg Combet is telling people to turn off lights and televisions?
It is envisaged that our carbon tax will be successful. Our cunning plan is to make the price of petrol so high that people will have to instead work from home. We will also provide a free windmill to every household. I have put Peter Garrett in charge of doing the back-of-the-envelope calculations for this new green scheme. This will ensure the people will get the full benefit of the NBN.
Another thing, how much more cost will be added to the NBN courtesy of the carbon tax?
With Bob Brown's permission, we plan to announce new legislation to exempt the NBN and all other government monopolies from paying the carbon tax.
Agriculture, which produces around a quarter of our carbon dioxide output, is exempt from the carbon tax. You're not really serious about this whole carbon pollution deal, are you?
Oh, Tim. Between you and me, the carbon tax has got nothing to do with reducing carbon dioxide emissions and climate change. Bob and I only exempted agriculture to get Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott's vote.
Why don't you just ban the mining, burning and exports of coal? Your boss Bob Brown wants to. He thinks that coal caused the Queensland floods.
That's Bob Brown and the Greens' ultimate plan. Me, I'm just in it for the fame and the money.
You've said that people shouldn't be worried about media estimates of the amount they will be penalized. Why should they believe you?
Have you ever known me to tell a lie, Tim? My word is my bond.
How does taking money off person and giving it to person be help the climate?
It's not about easy fixes, Tim. It's not about making things better. It's about advancing the Marxist war on capitalism by other means.
You'd be surprised, Miss Prime Minister, you really would, at the way clever lawyers can shift investments and capital around so that the source becomes agriculture.
We are way ahead of you, Tim. After the next election, we'll also introduce a super profits tax on bankers, lawyers and the agriculture sector. There will be no escaping the carbon tax under the government Bob and I lead.
In 2007, Labour Resources Minister Martin Ferguson said that a mere $30 carbon tax on local flights would kill the Australian aviation industry both domestically and internationally. If he was right, what does that mean for all Australian industries facing a carbon tax?
Of course he is right. If the high world oil price doesn't force the airlines out of business, then at least my carbon tax will.
What level of bureaucratic expansion will be required to deal with the intake and dispersal of something like $10 billion per year?
I am sure the bureaucracy managing such a scheme, along with our promise to give 10% to the UN, will mean about half will be redistributed to the rent seekers.
Will your compensation plans take into account Australia's regional differences in living standards? Because if they don't, Hard-up families in Sydney are going to be giving money to the well-off in Adelaide.
Our plan is to transfer money from poor people in rich cities like Sydney to rich people in poor cities like Adelaide. So your point is?
What percentage of revenue from the carbon tax will be lost in bureaucratic churn between it being collected by your government and handed out in compensation?
Using the BER as an example, I think a 30% commission is not unreasonable. I've got Labour hacks, Greens and independents to pay off after all.
Instead of creating a tax system that eventually gives people their money back, why not just let them keep their own damn money in the first place?
Tim, our aims are to extend the powers of government, to raise taxes, to weaken the capitalist system, to curtail personal freedom, to redistribute income and to bring ever closer the advent of an eco-fascist New World Order.
According to you, there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead. Would you mind telling us who does lead this government, then? Otherwise I've spent this time interviewing the wrong person.
Yeah. I wondered why you were talking to me instead of Bob Brown.